Hey guys, Firebat here. Welcome to the Whispers of the Old God card review number 4. If you missed some of the previous segments or want to check them out, feel free to click the thumbnail to my left. If you want to see a specific card and you don't want to watch the whole video, click on the card below me to check that out. Anyways, I'm going to just hop right into it with the first card here. Alright, so Spawn of Nazar. This is a 3 mana 2/2 with Death Rattle. Give all of your minions +1/+1. Kind of a cute card. Definitely got the art going for it, but the effect overall pretty underwhelming. For 3 mana, a 2/2 is extremely weak on the stat line. It's a death rattle effect, so you have to be in control of the board to really be able to trigger it on your own terms. Otherwise, your opponent could kill your other minions first and then trigger it. So I kind of view it as sort of a weak win more card. Not really too thrilled about it. Don't think it's going to see too much play. Alright, next we have the Boogie Monster. This is an 8 mana 6/7 that whenever it attacks and kills a minion, gain +2/+2. So it can't get the buff if it is your opponent's turn and they're attacking into it. It needs to be the attacker. So even if it didn't need to be the attacker, this card would still be probably pretty bad. I mean, it's got the stats of a Boulder Fist Ogre, which doesn't see play at 6 mana, and it's an 8-drop. And it has this effect that allows it to grow, but at the same time, it's like it has to be taking damage when it's growing, which is going to make it more weak to removal. And it's just too slow. Like if you play an 8-drop with no instant effect, it's usually pretty bad. So I guess maybe this card's going to be exceptional in Arena, but it's not really going to do anything for the constructed metagame. Next up we have Cyril, Poisoned Mind. This is a 4 mana 3/2 with a battle cry and a death rattle to add a random toxin to your hand. So let's just go through the toxins really quick. First we have the Blood Thistle toxin, which is like a shadow step. It returns a friendly minion to your hand, and then that minion costs 2 less. Next we have the Barathorn toxin. It gives a minion +3 attack, which is like a Blessing of Might, basically. Next we have the Fade Leaf toxin. It gives your minion stealth until the end of the next turn, like Conceal. And next we have Fire Bloom toxin, which deals 2 damage, like an Arcane Shot or something like this. So like all these toxins are actually like pretty much the same thing as actual playable cards. Oh yeah, and then we have the King's Blood toxin, which is like the best toxin in my opinion, and it's just a 1 mana draw card. All the toxins cost 1 mana. They all have pretty reasonable effects for their mana costs, and they're cards that are probably would be run in some decks. So I mean, the toxins on this card are insane. It's almost like drawing 2 cards with just a 4 mana 3/2, and all of those toxins have pretty good synergy with Cthulhu, like just being able to Shadow Step your Cthulhu, Stealth the Cthulhu buffers, draw a card to cycle in through your Cthulhu things. So I could see this seeing a lot of play in like Cthulhu Rogue and stuff. The downside of this card though is the stat line is extremely weak, and Rogue, generally speaking, is a pretty tempo-oriented deck, so playing a super weak stat line minion isn't really what you want to be doing, but at the same time, like these 2 valuable cheap spells in Rogue is insane. So I think it's going to see play. I don't think it's as good as the hype. I think it's like a kind of okay card. It's like statted very well. It's like hard to, it's like not busted. It's just good. But I don't know if it can compete with Tomb Pillager that much, so it might be seeing cuts. But it's definitely going to see a lot of play in the beginning, and then probably scale back the play a little bit, and then probably resurface again later, is my opinion. Like, the stat line is just so weak, but the effect is so strong. So it's going to take a lot of time for the metagame to stabilize before people figure out, is the metagame slow enough to really be able to play this card, or is it just better to have Pillagers in there? Because Pillager is also just an insane card, especially with Piloted Shredder out of the meta. The 5/4 body is so much stronger. So there's just a lot of things competing for that slot, especially like even Violet Teacher and Rogue's just absolutely nuts. So that 4-drop slot has a lot of competition, and I think you'll probably be able to find 1 slot for this guy, but I'm not sure if he's going to stick around. Next thing, we got Tentacles for Arms. Now this is a 5 mana 2 attack weapon with 2 charges, but its death rattle returns it to your hand, so potentially infinite weapon charges forever. But if you look at like the effect, it's so slow on the mana cost. Like 5 mana for this effect is ridiculous. Like, holy smokes. Your opponent really has to have absolutely nothing for this card to be good. It's really just like, it's like having Justicar and Rogue. The mana like usage comes out to eventually, and then at the same time it's like worse than Gorehowl in almost every way. It's like not vulnerable to weapon removal, I guess, but like if you want this effect in your warrior deck, why don't you play Gorehowl? Is my only question. So I'm not sure. Like it's got this really niche slot where it could be useful in, but then there's just better cards in that slot that will do that effect and perform much better than Tentacles for Arms. So yeah, I don't think this is going to see any play as long as Gorehowl is a card, and yeah, that's about that. Alright, so next up we have Infest, and it's a pretty interesting card. It has a really cool effect. Not sure how powerful the effect's going to be, but it's really cool. So it gives you, for 3 mana, the ability to add Death Rattle, draw a random beast to all of your minions on the field, which is pretty sweet. But the problem with it is it's probably a bit too slow. I think it's a lot faster than Lock and Load, so it has a lot more potential than Lock and Load for you to be able to just tempo out, get a bunch of things in the field, and then do like a Soul of the Forest approach and just not rely on an Unleash combo, but just play it as just a card that you, once you get ahead on board, you throw that out there, and hopefully it refills your hand and you win the game. But at the same time, like, there's also the dream of the Unleash Infest Hunter's Mark combo, but I don't think that's really realistic because currently there already is Unleash Colt Master for only 1 more mana, which draws actual cards from your deck instead of random beasts. And drawing a card from your deck is valued way higher than drawing a random beast, and that combo still doesn't see very much play, if play at all. So I don't think there's a lot of potential for the sort of combo plays with the Infest card, but I do think there's some potential for it to see play as like an early game board control hunter that just throws a whole bunch of stuff out there, plays this card and hopes to win, kind of like the Egg Druid approach that we've seen with some fancy Druid builds, with the Jackie Chan one that hit #1 legend a while ago. So maybe you could add some possibility for that, sure. Alright, next up we have Ragnaros Light Lord, and this is an 8 mana 8/8, and it can attack, which is pretty cool. Normally Ragnaros can't attack, but this version of Ragnaros can, and its effect is at the end of your turn, restore 8 health to a damaged friendly character. So it can heal your face, it can also heal any of your minions, which can be a potential downside because you can get the Lightwell effect of your opponent hits it for 1 with any random minion and then goes faced with the rest, and then Ragnaros, instead of healing you and saving your life, heals itself and you continue to die. So that's a downside, but I really, really like this card. I think it's incredibly strong. I think it is a much better stabilization card than Land Hands, because Land Hands draws you 3 cards, which doesn't help you control the board at all, whereas this heals you for 8 and puts an 8/8 in play that they have to kill, otherwise it's going to continue healing you for 8, so you have to really deal with it. The only issue is against the really face decks and the really heavy aggro decks, it comes down on turn 8, which is way too slow. So you're going to need other healing in your deck to be able to get to this point where then this can seal out the game for you, much like Tyrion would, or what have you. But I do really like the card. I think it's going to see play. I think it's going to be pretty strong. It's one of the stronger cards, I think, in the entire set right now. Next up, we have Cult Apothecry. I hope I'm saying that right. But anyway, this is a 5 mana 4/4 with Battle Cry. For each enemy minion, restore 2 health to your hero. So the downsides to this is token and death rattle cards being rotated out. So there's going to be a lot less minions on the field in general unless they print more. We've only seen half the set so far, so they could just randomly start printing a whole ton of tokeny cards. But at the moment, there isn't a lot of token cards in standards, so it's probably not going to get too much of a healing off. And it doesn't do anything against half of the decks you want to be healing against. The decks you want to be healing against are combo burn decks like Rogue and Freeze Mage, which this card is not going to do anything against. And then like face decks like Shaman, which this deck's not going to do anything against. And even like Face Hunter probably doesn't have too many minions in the field, because if you don't remove their minions, you're going to die. So you kill their Wolf Riders and stuff the turn they come out. So against all the decks you really, really need healing against, this effect isn't very good. But there's one thing that this would be really good in, and I was talking with Raynad on Value Town, and he brought this up, and I was pretty surprised by it. Like, I never even thought of it, and it was really cool. In Freeze Mage, you can play this card, because in Freeze Mage, you just freeze your opponent's board and ignore it, and this would be really strong in Freeze Mage. So, yeah, outside the box thinking there. That's the like one spot I can see this card see play. And yeah, Freeze Mage is still a deck, and Blizzard doesn't continue nerfing it into the ground, then this is definitely going to see play in Freeze Mage and be pretty strong, I think. Next up we have Mukla, Tyrant of the Vale, and this is a 6 mana 5/5. Add 2 bananas to your hand instead of your opponent's hand, like the traditional Mukla. So I kind of compare this card to like Toshli or Grand Crusader, as in it's like a 6 mana 5/5 that has some sort of card generation effect. Like, is 2 bananas better than a random paladin card on average? They're probably about the same. So that's how it can be pretty close to be comparable with Grand Crusader, but Grand Crusader didn't see much play. So overall, in my opinion, I think it's a pretty solid mech card. It might see some play, but I don't think it's going to see a lot of play. The interesting thing is that it's a beast, so if Beast Druid starts becoming a thing, this card is going to be really, really strong in Beast Druid, because normally Beast cards are kind of like understated and not very good, but this card is on the same comparison as cards that saw some play in Constructed before. Toshli and Grand Crusader were both in like the World Championships last year, so I mean they're cards that saw some amount of play, and this is a beast and is valued at about the same in my opinion. So I think it'll see play probably in Beast Druid if that becomes a deck, and it might see some play in Hunter, but I mean it's competing against Savannah Highmane, so that's a pretty hard competitor to have. Anyway, next up we have Shadow Word Horror. This is a 4-mana card, destroy all minions with 2 or less attack. I'm really not thrilled about this card. I think it's one of the weaker cards in the entire set. 2 attack is just like way too situational. There's only like one deck in all of Hearthstone that'll beat you to death with 2 attack minions, and that's like the Face Shaman deck with Flame Juggler, sorry, not Knife Juggler, and the Feral Spirits. Those are all 2/3 bodies, and they'll normally spam a lot of those things out there, and then maybe you can get this off. But I mean, 4 mana costs a lot for that sort of super situational effect. There's not going to be any Shrinkmeister in Standard, so that lowers its value. And Priest already has removal in the form against less than 2 attack with Shadow Word Pain and Cabal. So those are like very, very powerful cards that you're going to be running. Well, maybe not Shadow Word Pain, but Cabal you're going to be running anyway. So I'm not so sure as an AoE that only hits really small minions is too necessary. But I mean, it all depends on the metagame, right? If everyone's playing 2/3s and there's just tons of 2/3s everywhere, this card's going to be great. If it's just really fast decks with Flame Jugglers that try and aggro you down all the time with all 2/3s, then this is the card. But until that happens, this card's going to be total trash, and I expect it to be mainly trash. Alright, next we got Mark of Ysara. So this is a 2-mana card. Give a minion +2/+2. If it's a beast, draw a card. And that's a pretty solid card, especially since most of the Beast Druid cards thus far have been pretty mediocre. This one is actually just like a good standalone card. Even if you're not even in Beast Druid, it's not bad. It's Mark of the Wild. Basically, you don't really care about the taunt from Mark of the Wild, so I mean, it's basically the same card as Mark of the Wild, except occasionally you get to draw a card from it, which is pretty huge. Card draw is like one of the most valuable things in Hearthstone. And I mean, Druid has a lot of powerful beasts already. They've been adding more and more beasts to Druid throughout the expansions. We have Druid of the Saber in Druid. Druid of the Claw recently became a beast. There's Druid of the Flame. So there's a lot of potential for this buff to be able to land on for you to cycle your deck and get towards things. But what are you getting towards? What's the big finisher in Druid now is really the question. If it's still Force Roar and they don't nerf that, this is going to be nuts, because aggro Druid already sort of worked if you just took out the Fel Reavers and put in Stranglethorn Tigers. Now if you have this in there, you take out the Fel Reavers, put in Stranglethorn Tigers, now you're just buffing up these big minions and punching your opponent in the face with them and cycling towards your combo at the same time. So if aggro Druid can consistently draw Force Roar by turn 9, it's going to be ridiculous. But we are all hoping and praying that after 2 years of being killed by the combo, they will finally nerf it. So hopefully that happens, and that's going to kind of lower the value of this card, because you're not cycling into something so powerful, because Force Roar will be nerfed, hopefully. But if you are still cycling into Force Roar, this card is going to be insane. Alright guys, so that wraps up the Whispers of the Old Gods card review number 4. If you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe, follow me on all of the stuff and things. I'd appreciate it, and it would let you know when I release the part number 5 when new cards come out, and I'm just going to keep reviewing, keep giving my opinions, and try and keep you up to date with all of the latest cards, and hopefully more stuff in the future. Anyway, take care guys. Bat out. Here it is. Alright, so we have Vilefin Inquisitor.